Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be discussing the absolute fundamentals of nephrotic syndrome. When it comes to nephrotic syndrome, this is very important for our kidney pathology and pathophysiology, and we're going to make it easy and discuss some of the clinically high-yield points about what the patient might present with. Nephrotic syndrome is a triad. It is a triad of three findings, which include proteinuria, and remember, just like nephro has an O in it, pro has a rho as well. Nephro, rho, proteinuria, rho. That's how you can remember that the hallmark of nephrotic syndrome is proteinuria. You also get hypoalbuminemia, which makes sense because you're going to be losing proteins and you're going to be losing albumin. What about edema? Okay, I'm going to move it from there and write it here because edema is actually a consequence of the hypoalbuminemia and hyperlipidemia. So we're going to discuss the relations between each of these clinical features that the patient will present with. But remember, always be aware what is normal and what is abnormal. To understand any kind of pathology, you need to know what's the normal before you can figure out the abnormal. And the normal is that the kidney, the glomerular filtration, is not supposed to allow proteins to pass through. The proteins are bigger molecules and typically, normally, they're not supposed to pass through. What's abnormal, hello, nephrotic syndrome, is that now you're going to get passage of proteins out of the glomerulus into the kidney tubules and excreted, and that will then cause proteinuria. And remember, it's non-selective, whether that's from the plasma or anywhere else, it's non-selective, okay? So, what kind of proteins are lost in proteinuria? Albumin, our main plasma protein. Remember big Al the car, as we discussed in the complications in the other video, in bilirubin pathway video. Here, you have albumin is your plasma protein. It's your vehicle, it's your Uber for the passage of water-insoluble substances. You also have immunoglobulins. Immunoglobulins are crucial to fight against immune attacks or infections. And you also have loss of antithrombin 3, which is an actual anticoagulant protein. If you lose an anticoagulant protein, you're losing something that's stopping the coagulation. If you're losing that, the body will enter a hypercoagulable state. What's a hypercoagulable state? You're more prone to form clots, you're more prone towards strokes. So very dangerous, very clinically relevant, okay? So what does it mean by hypoalbuminemia? Why is it causing edema? Albumin helps regulate that oncotic pressure. It helps maintain that oncotic pressure. What is oncotic pressure? Think of it like a vacuum cleaner pump. A vacuum cleaner pump that's just literally sucking it all in with this force. Oncotic pressure is the same thing. It's that force that keeps the fluids in a constant maintained compartment level, and maintaining that level allows for that. It's the force that keeps the water in, okay, and solutes. Remember, our body can be divided into two compartments, and whenever the fluid flows, it flows from a low solute to a high solute area. And when you lose that albumin, that fluid will just flow into the interstitium and cause edema. So this means whenever our body is under normal physiological functioning and under abnormal pathological functioning, we then have a lot of proteins leaking out, albumin is getting lost in the urine, and it's less in the body. Lowered oncotic pressure, edema. What are the clinically high-yield edemas? So your clinically relevant edemas are periorbital edema. That means the patient will present, "Doctor, I have a swelling around the eye." The patient has swelling around the eye, peripheral edema, as well as generalized all across the body edema. and that is known as anasarca. The clinical name for it is anasarca. Keep that in your mind. It's also important in pathology in third year. So what else happens? Losing proteins means that you're getting dysregulation of your oncotic pressure. So naturally, when our body is trying to maintain homeostasis and maintain that oncotic pressure, remember our other organs will then start to compensate. And what steps up? The liver. The liver is going to step up and try and compensate for that dysregulated oncotic pressure, and the liver will start to produce lipoproteins. The production of lipoproteins will enter our body into a hyperlipidemia state, and clinically it's more than 10 millimoles per liter. What's frothy urine? Okay, this is going to come up time and time again in nephrotic syndrome. Whenever the patient has frothy, foamy urine, that's because there's a high amount of solutes in the urine. But most importantly, this is a sign of proteinuria. This is a clear indication of proteinuria. Okay, now in summary, you have proteinuria, you have hyperlipidemia because the liver is trying to compensate due to the albumin being leaked out in the urine and then being hypoalbuminemia. You have edema, periorbital, peripheral, generalized. And proteinuria, remember the rho should remind you of nephrotic syndrome. Nephrotic syndrome should remind you of proteinuria. Hope this was helpful. Please leave me some feedback, and many thanks.